is our very first Be Inspired panel. Be Inspired was an opportunity that we thought was necessary to bring the fans and the aspiring artists face to face with people with experience in different parts of the music industry. Tonight, I'm very excited to bring two people who have been fundamental to the Philadelphia music scene for well over a decade. The lovely Laiya St. Clair and Mr. Marc Byers.
When I was at Atlantic, I had a job at Atlantic that I didn't like, but I had to take the job because it was just like, wow, I got offered a job. Had a chance to, Clark Kent was moving Jay-Z at the time. This is when Tyrese had the Coca-Cola commercial on the bus and stuff like that, and flew him in to meet. But for some odd reason, nothing that I brought to the table was getting signed, because most of the stuff that I was getting signed was coming out of Atlanta. So I brought the kid Maurice to the table to try to get him a deal. He didn't accept the deal. So the publisher was like, hey, why don't you see if he'll allow you to take it somewhere else? Maybe 3 days later, she called me at my job on the phone and she said, hey, you got a minute? She's like, well, I'm gonna plug Jimmy Iovine and he wants to do the deal. Not only did he offer an incredible deal, but he offered me a consultant opportunity on top of the deal because he liked how I made the project. That made me get a true understanding, because I worked against label selling songs, but when I worked for the label, I got a chance to really get the nuances of like what really makes it tick, because I got a chance to see internally how you work a project from soup to nuts. I left the company, signed this guy, didn't work out really well. Then after that, I get a call from a guy by the name of Mike Lynn. That was Dre's right-hand man, and he's like, look, Dre wants us to get with you, see if we can find some R&B stuff. So he flew Mike in. It was an R&B act. It was a group out of Sharon Hill, and their father, he didn't get it. So when I walked back out to the car, I was like, look, we gotta go, because it's not happening. And we had to call a Hail Mary. And the Hail Mary was Eve. He gave her a call, said, yo, where are you? She was like, I'm at my mom's house, this, that, and the other. He's like, you gotta get up. He's like, you interested in the deal? She was like, I'm not sure. So, I grabbed the phone, talked to her for a bit. We went and picked her up, took her to my mom's house, pulled out a boom box in my mother's living room. And because I work with producers first, I played music and she started rhyming. And Mike was blown away and he called Dre on the phone, and a week later we were in LA. Eve, Beans, a kid named Butter, he saved Usher's project before Confessions, because he was the guy that brought in You Remind Me. He was a Philly guy, and he was from Stanton and Worcester. And we had known him because we represented a group that he was in called Brother, and they were on Atlantic. We signed him to Vincent Herbert actually at that time. And Vincent was a teenager, but he was moving, doing a lot of remixes, and he was in the world of remixes. So Sylvia really loved him, the business loved him. He had a production deal opportunity, we had a relationship, and we ended up doing a deal with them for, with Vince. And inside of it, Butter was the producer of the group. He was young, he didn't really have any gear. We had a great relationship with Sylvia, because Sylvia was a part of the reason why I got hired at Atlantic. She kind of validated it, because she was a part of leadership in the whole WEA system, which was Warner, Elektra, and Atlantic. So she had ran Elektra and Atlantic before, and she had Philadelphia roots. And when she saw, me rolling, like really working hard, and she realized I was from Philly, she stepped in and helped out, and that's how I got the job. So it was that. It was introducing Scott Storch to Dre, because we knew Scott from the roots, and my dad sold Scott his first car.
Really?
But like Atlantic made me realize that if you want to make a city work, you not only have to make sure that the talent is really, really good coming out of the city, but you also have to create an environment to make other people want to come. So every time we worked with talent, we always made sure that outside talent came to Philly, because if the news doesn't see energy happening, then the money is not going to see energy happening. So we've always made, whether it was the producers that we worked with or the artists, like the Beans, the Jay-Z's, and all those guys, we made sure that they spent a substantial amount of time in Philly. But even with Dran Vidal, we made sure that Justin Timberlake and Ushers and J-Lo's and Mariah's and all of those guys, probably everybody that we worked with, except Michael Jackson, came to Philly.
Outside, when you hear these stories, I know it sounds kind of crazy that all these people are connected. Right. And me as I would say half-time outsider, because I'm not born and raised here, but being here for over 15 years, it's so interesting to watch the way that Philly moves. And I feel like when Marc and everybody popped off was a pivotal time for Philly and Philly music. They started a whole new era, but going along with Marc and Eve and everybody over there popping off, then you had, of course, you know, Touch of Jazz over here popping off with Jill Scott and situations like that. And then, of course, you have the Black Lily, and all these things are happening at the same time. So you're creating Floetry, Jill Scott, Beans, you know, like all of these people are happening at this moment, and Eve. So it's just interesting. And now, you know, even in looking at the Black Lily and you look at some of the musicians who were just playing behind like Jaguar Wright and the Jazzy Fat Nasties, and now you have Adam Blackstone, who was one of those people who is a music director for Jay-Z and Maroon 5, and he's not alone.
It comes out Amir's camp.
Exactly, and it's a whole group of these people who used to play together along with Aaron, you know, from Aaron Draper to Kurt to Kurt.
Spanky, that plays for Gaga and a gang of other people. I think he's out with Lauryn Hill now. Right. But Spanky's probably the best drummer in the world.
Yeah.
Right. From here.
Being on commercial radio in this era was interesting for me because, you know, it was a time where, yes, certain things were playing, like, you know, I feel like it was easier for like the Beans, the Freeze, but at the same time in my heart, I was like a roots girl. I was at the Black Lily every Tuesday, wouldn't miss it. And also for me, I had been given, at some point in my career, I had been given this show called Sunday Morning Soul, which was a chance for me to kind of be able to play some of those people like Kendrick the Family Soul, but at the same time, it was always a constant battle. So I was the girl at the commercial radio station in the music meetings battling like, well, why can't we play India Irie? Just because she has locks and she's dark skin doesn't mean that she's in this box. She's talking about the video, and all the girls don't want to be looking like the girl in the video. Why is this so deep? And just because Erykah Badu has a hair wrap, why can't y'all figure out that she's, you know, I was that girl. Like, they're saying the same things, it just, so it was interesting to come up in an era and kind of try to cheerlead for some of this amazing talent that was being appreciated all over the world. But I will say this about Philly. Philly is hard because they know that they can be, because there's such a wealth of talent that comes from here that I just found it interesting as somebody moving to here that like my hometown is the #1 market for a lot of Philadelphia artists, you know, whereas like for Jill and the Roots and Floetry and people like that, DC is the #1 market. Philadelphia is like #5, where it was #1 for Jay-Z, you know?
Philly was more of a street city, you know, and, you know, we were putting up a lot of like hip hop music, and the streets and the fabric of the streets was so hard at that time, just like lifestyle, not necessarily killer, but just lifestyle of like the hustle. You gotta know who you are. You gotta start off with knowing who you are, so when you get out there, you're not presenting this thing that you strummed up in your mind that is only honest when you wanna act like that. You know who you are coming through. So if you're a little crazy, then be crazy on records. You know what I'm saying? If you are in love with the notion of being in love, then be that on records, because in the end, if you go out being a fake and it doesn't work, you're gonna be scared to be yourself. But more importantly, when you come back to being yourself, nobody's gonna believe it. The show-off stuff, it don't get you nowhere. It's the emotions of somebody feeling what you're doing is what makes them stay with you. And you gotta slowly build, like you have to know that you're building something rather than like your buddies telling you it's legit. You can look at the numbers and see if it's climbing. You can look at the comments and see what they like. You can look at what you post and see what they like. Because the numbers are gonna resonate differently with the honesty of what the audience likes versus your ego. So it's like, how do you be honest? Which most people have a problem with. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times with you not being in the business, you're relying on your friends to create a truth that they don't know about because they're not experienced. You gotta have experience with art. It can't be buddy with art.
networking is important, and I say that to say that, I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were like, as many jobs as you can apply to on LinkedIn, it don't mean nothing if you don't know somebody. How many times have you looked at the LinkedIn job and you saw like 200 people have applied for it, and you're like, well, how can I look? It's not gonna be just a resume, it's gonna be who you know. So again, it just goes back to creating long-lasting relationships and not making them always based on who you are now, but who people have the potential to be. And I would also say too, to really study and know your craft. There was a time, and I have to get back on myself with this, but I was a trade girl. Like I would read my trades from your billboards to whatever the radio magazine of the moment is, but just knowing your industry, knowing who the players are. I mean, that's kind of important so you can know who to follow once you get into the party. You're lucky enough to get into the party, you can go, introduce me to Mark. I need you to, right there, because that's what I do to Mark.
I want to thank the both of you for dropping buckets and jewels of knowledge tonight. You feel inspired?